Hey, good evening, folks. How are you? Hope everybody's doing well. Thanks for tuning in to the Dave Englishman Show. I appreciate the watch. Tonight we're going to get into a total of 5 different topics, all of them very relevant for today. Some of the stuff is as new as today, and let's dive right into it. So we have data from the U.S. Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, suggests that the novel coronavirus's true fatality rate in the United States, which takes into account mild and asymptomatic cases, stands at 0.26%, about 8 to 15 times lower than earlier mortality rates estimates of between 2 and 4%, which prompted the lockdowns. So we go from there into what basically happened in our nursing homes. And a study came out, and this is the most important coronavirus statistic. 42% of U.S. deaths are from 0.6% of the population. Blue state governors and mayors were sending their elderly corona patients to nursing homes, which you already know, and they were basically infecting the rest of the nursing homes, and people were dying right, left, and center. It amazes me that that's a staggering number. 42% of U.S. deaths are from 0.6% of the population, folks. Why did they do this? Makes you wonder. So Fauci stated that it wasn't safe to distribute communion, but a week ago he came out and said that it's okay to have sex with strangers. It's your choice. Not kidding. Dr. Anthony Fauci, one of President Donald Trump's top coronavirus advisors, has called on the church not to distribute Holy Communion during the coronavirus pandemic, but last month said sex with strangers is fine if you're willing to take a risk. That's unbelievable. And yes, for me, that it is June 1st. It's amazing. Totally amazing, the stuff that goes on. Another thing that Fauci did, Fauci changed his tune. He now says a second COVID-19 wave may never happen, and he says that mask wearing is just symbolic. Not kidding. In a Wednesday interview with CNN's Newsroom, Fauci, member of the White House Corona Task Force, said that the second COVID-19 wave is not necessarily inevitable. We often talk about the possibility of a second wave or of an outbreak when you're reopening. We don't have to accept that as an inevitability. And the article goes on, and he basically says that wearing a mask, right here, wearing a mask is largely symbolic at this point. But yet, all of us blue states, and I work in a blue state and live in a blue state, that have these phase 1 of their lockdown reopening, oxymoron, that they still have us wearing face masks. People are being shamed for not wearing a face mask. Isn't it my body, my choice? I mean, hey, we're just throwing it back at you. So one of the other stories that came out, shooting deaths and COVID-19 numbers, 80% of deaths that were listed raise questions. That's the title of this article. A new report by the Freedom Foundation reveals 80% of coronavirus deaths listed in Washington state list some variation of COVID-19 in one of the causes of death on the death certificate. And the state admitted that their COVID-19 death list includes shooting deaths. This kind of goes with what I told you a couple of shows ago, where they listed an actual suicide as a COVID-19. They listed a motorcycle accident where the motorcycle hit a car going through a red light and died, COVID-19. I mean, it's just insane what they've done. Northwell Health probing ventilator use amid high coronavirus death rate. And I highlighted this, something that's very important I think people need to know, and it's not coming out. New York, its largest hospital system, is conducting a sweeping analysis of its use of ventilators while treating coronavirus patients during the peak of the pandemic. The study comes as experts have raised concerns that an over-reliance on the machines may have actually caused lives. And it goes on. It says, one theory is if you put some patients on a ventilator, you might irritate the lungs more. That's a theory that we're looking at. That came from Dr. Thomas McGinn, and he's Northwell Senior Vice President and Deputy Physician-in-Chief. So that's pretty telling. Meanwhile, remember, Trump had to force the automakers to start making ventilators because there wasn't enough of them. And then they mysteriously found some in New York, but the mayor ended up selling his off to Blasio. So this one here is also a pretty cool story. This is titled Executive Orders Are Ruining the Country. And it says here, they're killing the Constitution, destroying the rule of law, upsetting the already delicate balance among legislative, executive, and judicial branches, and seriously setting the nation's course down a path of political and cultural upheaval. They're turning the Constitution into a mockery. I'm just reading you the news that's coming out the last couple of days. But if you live in a blue state, I'm sure you already know this. So this woman here, her name is Peggy Hall. She's a California educator. And I'm going to read to you very quickly why she says that these lockdowns are totally unlawful. And in the video that's below, she explains to you how to sue your governor for the lockdown. Quite interesting. It says Peggy Hall, a community college health professor, says a federal law regulates authority over health and welfare to the most local political entity in question. Local agencies have the responsibility and the authority to safeguard public health. The governor can declare a state of emergency only in response to a natural disaster and epidemic. Furthermore, the threat must be of such magnitude that adequate response is beyond the ability of any single county or city. And it goes on. She explains that according to the law, an epidemic is defined as a disease rate above the normal. Since the COVID-19 death rate is only about 1/3 the normal death rate for seasonal flu, it does not have a disease rate above the normal. Therefore, California does not have an epidemic, and a declaration of lockdown is in violation of California law. Does anyone in government care about laws when they stand in the way of power and wealth? Makes you kind of wonder. So if you follow her video, which is below, she actually shows you how you can sue your state government, your governor. So this here, disturbing. And just before I turned on the camera to do this video, I was speaking with my wife. She had watched a video of a black man in Minneapolis, and he was on the street corner in front of his business, yelling at the crowd that this was his business that they had looted and burned to the ground. And he told them, I came from the ghetto. I came from nothing. This is everything I have. You burned down my business. You burned down my car. You burned down my computer. I have nothing. So we're going to get to the protesters, and we're going to get to everything that we've talked about so far. But I wanted to go through everything so you have a sense of what's really going on out there. So a former bar owner says that George Floyd and the fired officer, and that's Chauvin, that they both worked for her at the same time as bouncers. So It says here, a Minneapolis woman who used to own a club on the south side of the city says George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, the officer who kneeled on Floyd's neck during the detainment prior to his death, both worked for her as security guards at the same time and held overlapping shifts. So my question is, was the police officer getting rough with the guy because he knew him and knew what he was capable of? Did the police officer get rough with him because there was a vendetta from a prior altercation from when they worked at the bar? What's the real story? We might never know. It might come out in court. But what happened was pretty despicable. It was horrible. But it doesn't give these people the right to have riots. And I'm not talking about the protesters. There are peaceful protesters out there. And then there are those that are rioting, looting, pillaging, burning down businesses. We're not even out of a COVID-19 pandemic lockdown where businesses are all back to work. And then these people come out of the woodwork and burn buildings down and take businesses out. So I want to know what's the real story behind these two. How well did they like each other? What was their relationship like? Was there an altercation? I want to know those things. Because apparently this cop has been implicated in a homicide in the past. And some say it was just after Amy Klobuchar quit state and actually ran for Senate. And some people say it was after. So from what I can get from articles that I think I trust implicitly, she was already senator when there were no charges pressed against this officer for a prior altercation against a Native American. So I just wonder sometimes how the left functions when there's injustice. And I think most everybody in the country agrees that what this man did was egregious. It was absolutely horrifying that he knelt on the man's neck. And you can see that his other foot is coming off the ground in the video. It's moving around. It's because he didn't have any weight on that foot at all. The leg was up. The foot was up. All of his weight was on the man on the ground. And the man on the ground's laying on his stomach, proned out, hands behind his back, can't breathe. And this guy doesn't do anything. But neither do the people standing around, and neither do the police. People take videos, but nobody's doing anything. I'm sorry, but an injustice is being committed even by the police. People need to step up. There's plenty of brave people out there who would have stepped up. Democrats have made black communities afraid because they let jerks like this on the police force. And there's a lot of great cops out there. I know a lot of them. And they're good people. They would never have done that. Never. This is a video that most of you probably haven't seen. And this was just released today on TMZ, or yesterday. So I want you to see the altercation from a different angle, and to see some different things going on, because it's believed that he was roughed up in the back of the car as well. What were they doing to him in the back of the car? What did they do to him? Did they tase him? They said he had possibly drugs in his system. And they say that he had, something else going on medically with him. So, was it a combination of things that killed him? I mean, still, it doesn't matter. What the police officer here did is just inexcusable. So, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what other conditions he had. This was the direct contributor to his death, was this officer. So I started thinking about the riots, and kind of one thing led to another, and I'll show you why. So I found this interesting paper. It's a book. It's called the Antifa Manual, and it talks about, it says here, do not distribute to any CIS white males, non-POC, non-LGBTQ peoples, aka fascists. So this was a lot of the chapters that are, or paragraphs that are in this, were taken from a book, which I'll get into in a minute. But this was found in a university, or at a university, after an Antifa rally. And it talks about white privilege, talks about creating a culture of tolerance, crashing the borders, control the media. It's important to gain control of the media through any means necessary in these early stages of this movement. And it goes on to talk about how they create their movement in the United States. And it goes on to talk about the next crucial step is to threaten the livelihoods of anyone who dares speak out against our agenda. They've tried that. I mean, everything that's written in here, they've tried to do this. They've tried to silence conservatives. They've tried to silence just everything to do with conservatism. And so far, they've gotten away with it. So it's pretty bad that these people are the ones who are really rioting in our major cities. These people. And we'll get into it. So over here, and this is the actual book called the Antifa Anti-Fascist Handbook by Mark Bray. And I'm going to read you a paragraph because it's quite telling. It says, objections arose when the almost entirely male British delegation, who believed that anti-fascist strategy should be developed through the prism of class rather than race, argued that propaganda should be catered primarily toward the white working class. The potential popular base of fascism rather than the marginalized victims of fascism. At the end of the conference, only 9 of the 22 visiting groups joined the new international militant anti-fascist network, including AFA Hanover and Rochapkin from Germany, the Anti-Fascist Platform Zaragoza, Toronto Anti-Fascist Forum, and the Minneapolis Anti-Racist Action. It's kind of funny that there's a faction in Minneapolis for Antifa. I think there's probably a faction in every major city, and I never thought about that before, but maybe I should look into that too. But it's really telling that this organization is behind the people who are committing the violent acts within these riots. Again, there's protests, and then there's the rioters. And I'll get into why a little later on. So this article is by the American Thinker. And I wanted to highlight something here. It talks at the very beginning about the riots and what's really going on, and then it gets into this. Perhaps the people pulling the strings of these riots think this level of anarchy will be blamed on President Trump, but it is more likely that it will ensure his re-election. These things do not happen in Republican-run cities. They happen in cities whose leaders are actually racist, but fear being labeled as such, so they step back and reveal their own bigotry of low expectations. It's tragic for their cities and for their citizens from who they instinctively expect criminal behavior. George Soros is most likely funding much of the chaos and is delighted by what he sees. Now we are all seeing the consequences of the tyranny and political correctness that enforce the decree that common sense has been outlawed and nihilism is the order of the day. As of today, Antifa was labeled a terrorist group by President Trump. So they're now labeled as a terrorist organization for domestic terrorism. Well, wouldn't you think that Michael Moore, considering he thinks highly of Antifa and he basically marches to the same drum and talks about committing violent acts, actually Michael Moore called for the demolition of the Minneapolis police headquarters as contrition to Black America. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Left-wing documentary filmmaker Michael Moore declared early Friday morning that the Minneapolis Police Department headquarters must be demolished as a contrition to Black America in the midst of rioters setting the police precinct ablaze. When is he going to be charged? I want to see heads roll. And if you're like me on the right, you want to see justice prevail on multiple levels. I'm getting there. I want you to imagine, I'm going to change the topic here, but I'll tie it all up at the end. Imagine here that we are dragged into a war not by our design. Xi Jinping, to the military, the Chinese military, said, "It is necessary to prepare for war." In an address to Chinese military officers at the annual meeting of the National People's Congress, Communist China's rubber stamp legislature dictator Xi Jinping said it was important to step up preparations for armed combat against various threats, specifically mentioning Taiwan independence forces. But he says, various threats. Are we a threat? Absolutely, we're a threat. Have they been a threat to us? Absolutely, they have been a threat to us. And here's the problem, is that our past administration, the last administration, was selling us out. They were selling our country out to the Chinese by the boatloads. These people were making money hand over fist. Biden's son is just the tip of the iceberg. I swear, Biden's son is just the tip of the iceberg. But they sold us out. And let's talk about why. So Democrat Party presidential candidate Joe Biden has said he welcomes Chinese intrusion into all levels of the U.S. government, classrooms, laboratories, athletic fields, and boardrooms. Chinese intrusion into all levels of the U.S. government. He said these things, folks. The comments unearthed from a 2011 Sichuan University speech demonstrate either a fundamental misunderstanding of the Chinese Communist Party or outright collusion with it. Biden said, in order to cement this robust partnership, we have to go beyond close ties with Washington and Beijing, which we're working on every day. They go beyond it to include all levels of government, go beyond it to include classrooms and laboratories, athletic fields, and boardrooms. He goes on to say that's why it's also important that our military leaders work together, get to know one another, not just our political leaders, but our military leaders. The United States should undertake to make it easier for Chinese business people to obtain visas to travel to the United States. It takes much too long for that to happen. So, Biden was selling us out. His son came home from China with a $1 billion deal. $1 billion just put in a bank account for him to run a company for the Chinese. And it's his slush fund. He can do kind of what he wants with it. $1 billion. $1 billion. Think about that for a minute. So I talked a couple of shows, the last couple of shows, about ballot harvesting and voter fraud and selling ballots and just making ballots disappear. Well, a USPS mail carrier was charged with fraud after allegedly tampering with vote-by-mail requests. It says here, federal and state prosecutors in West Virginia announced Tuesday that they had charged a U.S. Postal Service mail carrier with attempted fraud for allegedly tampering with requests for vote-by-mail absentee ballots. It's already beginning. And it goes on. It only gets worse. A Michigan city clerk has been charged with altering ballots. We are told by so many on the left that ballot tampering and election fraud does not occur. Once they are confronted with an example of it happening, we are then told by them that it rarely happens. At what point are they going to admit it does happen and happens more often than we think? Now we have an example of election fraud and ballot tampering right here in Michigan, and it's a Democrat that's been charged. The National Review is reporting that Shakira Hawkins, the city clerk for Southfield, Michigan, has been charged with 6 felony counts for allegedly altering absentee ballots during the November 2018 election. Mrs. Hawkins, a registered Democrat, was arraigned Monday in Southfield on falsifying returns of records, forgery of a public record, misconduct in office, and multiple counts of using a computer to commit a crime. So not only did it just begin, but it's been going on. And if we allow this to happen with these mail-in ballots that the liberals are pushing for, we're doomed. We need Trump for another 4 years. Clean this up. So this here, I wanted to play this, and I'm calling this segment kind of like how they do it. And by that I mean, how have the so-called Democrats, the socialists in the House, how have they managed to manipulate the American public since Trump won? Not since he became president, but since Trump won. And why? Let's watch. This is Nancy Pelosi, her own words.
And then we call it the wrap-up smear. If you want.
I'll put it back. This is well worth listening to. Listen carefully.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You demonize, and then we call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made.
Did you catch that? They make up the narrative. They feed it to the news media. The news media then publishes it, makes everybody kind of say, wow, look what happened in the news. And then they come out with their fake narrative and their fake BS investigations and all their bullshit that they come up with for the impeachment and try to make it seem real what's been reported in the news. It's collusion. They committed collusion. Not with Russians, well they did that too, but collusion with the media. The news media is in cahoots with the DNC and the Looney Tunes on the left. So let's get to this. A CNN Journalist of the Year quits, admits that he wrote fake news. No, can't be. He says, I am sick and I need to get help. This is Klaus Relatus. He said in his confession, he explained it was a fear of failing that made him falsify the news for liberal outlets, earning him praise and prestigious awards in the process. My pressure to not be able to fail got even bigger the more successful I became. This is now according to a German newspaper, Der Spiegel. Relatus made up stories and invented protagonists in many of his articles in order to push liberal talking points, demonize conservatives, and reinforce the globalist worldview. Wow. Goes on to say, he said, who was awarded CNN's highest prize for journalism in 2014 was exposed as a long-term writer of fake news after another reporter raised suspicions about a popular anti-Trump story he wrote recently about the United States-Mexican border. So now we have people in the news coming out and basically trying to repent. I showed you a video 5 videos ago of a senior journalist admitting in a bar that they make up crap about Trump. He knows it's all fake and he knows what Trump's done so far is really good for the country, but it doesn't matter. They suppress that and pump out their crap. I posted that. That video's in one of my videos. And it's happening. We go from that to Van Jones. Van Jones says it's not the KKK that blacks should fear, it's white liberals. I read this, I laughed. So during a CNN segment, liberal pundit Van Jones, who is known for having moments of lucidity, dropped a truth bomb that I don't think most liberals wanted to hear. Jones was commenting on the situation unfolding in Minneapolis and the death of George Floyd. When he made that comment, he says it's not the KKK black should fear, it's white liberals. So when you've got the liberals are coming out saying that the liberals are the ones that are absolute Looney Tunes and that they're the ones that are causing most of everything negative that's happening for the black community as well as the white, is very telling that a man of his moral character towards the liberal party had the fortitude to come out and actually admit that his party is full of hacks and quacks. I have a little bit more respect for the man than I did before, and I didn't have much. So now we have Mr. Obama calls on Democrats to go further in pushing the unfinished leftist agenda on America. Yep, you can't make that up. So he says, after months of silence and speculation, former President Barack Obama formally endorsed his Vice President Joe Biden in his campaign for President of the United States on April 14th. In the process, Obama called for a far more aggressive, progressive agenda than the one he campaigned on himself. And he goes on to talk about, if he were running today, I wouldn't run the same race or have the same platforms as I did in 2008. The world is different. There's too much unfinished business for us to just look backwards. We have to look to the future. Bernie understands that, and Joe understands that. So you have this man, the worst president in United States history, with the most closed administration and the largest amount of scandals now proven. And he's coming out to make comments about what they need to push for their agenda that they still haven't put through. So I believe a couple of things here. And before I get into this speech, I want you to understand that this man, Mr. Obama, half achieved what the globalists want for the United States. Hillary was, whoever Obama's successor was to complete what was started. Who were the most diehard socialists in the party? And who has turned left over the last, really far left, over the past 12 years or so? It wasn't Bernie. Bernie's always been out there. It was Hillary and Biden and Kerry. It's like they were being bought off to subscribe to something that they kind of half subscribe to in their form of being the Democrat Party. But they've gone so far left with the whole liberalism, socialism, Democrat socialism crap that it's the party's almost unrecognizable. And they have tried everything to remove President Trump. They have tried to get him out under the 25th Amendment, which if Biden gets in, that's what's going to happen to him. Saying that he was unfit for office mentally. Which is why I think Biden made the slip up the other day when asked, do you have a black female candidate as your vice president? He says, I have a lot of black female candidates and I have a lot of white female candidates. Anyway, he's completely lost his mind. Completely lost his mind. He made a comment the other day that Joe Biden could beat Joe Biden. And he basically said, yeah, I can beat Joe Biden in the election. He's losing his mind. And he was in this man's administration dealing with the Chinese. Meanwhile, they wanted Hillary or Biden or Kerry. They wanted somebody who had the flavor for the Democrat Party that they could put in the wings of Obama and finish what he started. These people are radicals. They've all read Rules for Radicals. See, the difference between those ones and Bernie is Bernie's just, he'll tell you what he is, and he'll tell you what he wants, and tell you what he's all about, and tell you what he's going to do. And some of what he wants to do is pretty scary. But it's the same things they want to do. The only difference is they're not coming out and telling you that that's what they want to do. They're skirting the issue. Meanwhile, they can't get it put in legislatively, so they tried to backdoor everything through the courts, which is why you've got, judges like the one in the Michael Flynn case who's now trying to hold up a precedence case by not dropping this case against Flynn. And he had to go get himself a lawyer because he doesn't know what's going to happen. So all of this is happening for a reason, folks. This is their last gasp. They've tried everything. They've tried the coronavirus. They've tried throwing everything at us. And they've got the blue state governors and blue state city mayors are also throwing everything they have at us. So they're keeping us closed down still to some degree. Wearing face masks, social distancing, lining up outside stores. So my question is, if you can do all of that, how come we can't go voting? But my bigger question that I have for everyone, including Democrats, mainstream Democrats, the ones who hang more towards the middle, and kind of agree with a lot of what Trump's doing, just don't like maybe his tweets or don't like his rough edges or the bravado, but that's just him. He's been like that forever. But even before he ran, he told everybody what he was running for. He told everybody what he was going to do. He said he's going to tear down the globalists and he's going to end the New World Order. He's going to drain the deep state and he's going to give America back America and our Constitution. And so far he's delivered, folks. Whether you hate the man or love the man, he's delivered. So, are you, as conservatives or Democrats, in your communities and your states that are locked down? My question for all of you, and it's a question I've asked myself, how long until you go out and you march in front of the State House and say enough is enough? We need to put our country back to work. This is all for nothing but to see how much of your muscle you can flex, because you plan on rigging the election and you plan on trying to take us over by force. That's why you push your damn legislation on guns. That's why you have shuttered people in their homes. You've made people feel scared. You've closed down businesses. You've bankrupted families and businesses. Large big box stores have gone bankrupt. Yeah, you crazy Democrats care more about winning an election by cheating and by being media scums than by winning it honestly on ideas that would benefit the American people, because you have nothing that would benefit the American people. The Democrats have nothing. All they want is they're drunk on power and they just want more. So I want you to hear this. It is something that when I heard it, I was like, good for you. You're finally getting your message out about what's really happened over the last 4.5 years since Trump announced that he was going to run. These people have been after him. They were after every conservative, I believe. There's more coming out. Much, much more. Barr didn't appoint more attorneys and prosecutors to this case because of nothing. There's way more to this case, and I believe it goes on a pyramid right to the top. I think it goes right to this man right here. So let's listen to this and take it in for everything that it's worth, because I believe that everything he is saying here to be 100% factual. Bank on it.
People have done a phenomenal job. But what am I doing? I'm fighting the deep state. I'm fighting the swamp. And I said I was doing it, and I'm exposing the swamp. I think if it keeps going the way I'm going, and Ratcliffe is fantastic, if it keeps going the way it's going, I have a chance to break the deep state. It's a vicious group of people. It's very bad for our country. And that's never happened before. You happen to be a victim of the deep state, I hate to tell you, whether you know it or not, but they've treated you horribly over the years. And so have they treated many other people. They never thought I was going to win, and then I won. And then they tried to get me out. That was the insurance policy. She's going to win, but just in case she doesn't win, we have an insurance policy. And now I beat them on the insurance policy. And now they're being exposed. Comey is a dirty cop. McCabe, bad guy. These are all bad guys. Lisa Page and Strzok, these are the two lovers, right? And they used public servers. They put it out public because they didn't want anybody to see, like spouses, etc., to see that they were having an affair. And because they did that, they got caught. Tremendous things have happened. They forged documents. We caught them. They have people that have forged documents. I would like to see it move much faster, I'll be honest with you. To me, I don't need any more information. I know, and I purposely stayed out of it. Other than I appoint people, I purposely stayed out of it. But I'll tell you what they've done, if this were President Obama, if this were a Democrat instead of a Republican, People would have been in jail for 2 years. Many people would have been in jail for 2 years already with a 50-year term. Okay, 50 years. But we caught him. Now, hopefully Bill Barr is going to do something about it. And you know what other things are going to come out too? And a lot of other things are going to come out. But you don't even need other things. What they've done is so corrupt. They've tried to take down a duly elected president of the United States. Happens to be, in this case, me. But we can never allow it to happen again.
I watched that, and I was truly blown away at the fact that everything that has happened that they have tried to blame him for, and they tried to pin on him, they've caught people lying, they've found the documents, they've exposed it all. It was a web of deception, and it's, as Nancy said, spin it in the media and then, agree with it with stupid, the Mueller investigation and the FBI investigation and so on and so on and so on, the impeachment, I'll wear a wiretap, the 25th Amendment. I mean, just everything that they've done. And then they tried to say the COVID thing, he didn't do anything, fast enough. At the beginning, they said he shouldn't have shut down, travel. Everything that they accuse him of, they themselves have done. And it's all for power. So it begs the question, right? Because under the Obama administration, and now you even have Biden saying, he would, him and Bernie, who would go ahead and take away your guns. Bernie obviously would hire the kid from Texas, the idiot. I can't remember his name. He's now irrelevant. But Biden believes in the same thing. All they want to do is take your guns. And they're drunk on power. And everything was supposed to be completed in the second term of a Democrat, 16-year run from what they planned. They thought they had it in the bag, and he won. And they couldn't deal with it because he interrupted everything. And because of their stupidity and their dishonesty, they're getting caught. They're going to be the ones going to jail. And he is forever going to change this country positively for America. So there's only one reason why the government would want to disarm you after 243 years. And that's probably because they were going to do something to you that you wouldn't approve of. And they wouldn't want you to shoot back. So don't ever, ever be like Canada and relinquish your arms. Never. It's our right to protect us, our families, our friends, our freedom, and our liberty. Yeah, it's up to us. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos, but watch some of the videos from the rioting, and you see the burning police cars and cops running down the road for their life. And yet they say, oh, well, we're going to take your guns. You can call the police. Really? The police are running. Okay. So, I'm fine, thanks. I'll keep my guns. So, the last thing I want to get into, and I wrote it down because this really describes the Democrat Party and what they've done through every slanderous thing that they've thrown at Trump since he started running right up until now. How they've used the pandemic to try and ruin an economy at the expense of the American people to make the president seem like he couldn't do his job and the economy tanked, therefore vote for a Democrat. I mean, they've thrown everything, and now it's getting to the point where it's definitely at the expense of the American public. People, you can't vote these people in at all. You can't. And I'm going to show you why. I hope every single one of you that you love your kids, but these are my kids, and I really don't want my kids to ask me this, ever. I don't want my kids to ask me one day, Dad, why didn't you fight for our future? I want to fight for my kids' future, and right now, this is the way that I can fight, because I can try to educate some people on the news of the day that's not being reported mainstream, at least a lot of it. Some of the stories you may have heard pieces of, but you can go and you can read the rest of these stories and get the real true nuts and bolts of what's really going on. But what I'm telling you about what's going on in the background, that all of this is taking place, isn't 2020 kind of one of the weirdest years you've ever lived in? I mean, it almost feels like, I don't even know how to describe it. But I'm like, this isn't for real. When am I going to wake up? I'm like, seriously. We've had everything from weird weather to snow in May to 70-degree days in March, to a pandemic, to at the end of an impeachment. I mean, just look at everything that's happened. And now all the information's coming out that was supposed to come out right around the time the pandemic started. Remember I told you all the information was supposed to come out, and it didn't because of the pandemic? Well, I think during the whole pandemic, I think a lot of other things came to the forefront too. And I think that there's a lot of other investigations going on in a lot of other areas, because I think some really sick people in the globalist movement have infected our country. And I believe the DOJ is onto it. I think NSA is onto it now that you've got some good people. And I believe you're going to see some other top people in departments that weren't Trump appointees are going to go down as well. I think all of this was planned. I think I'm not saying that the pandemic was planned. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying once it landed on our shores, people like Fauci and Bricks and Gates and other doctors and political pundits and politicians grabbed onto this and ran with it for what they could get out of it. They tried to get every mile out of it in political points against Trump, so that they could try to lower his numbers, make people hate him, blame him, and now, you know, there's really nothing left that they can do. He's draining the swamp by the day, and they're all being found out. There's nothing they can do except one thing, and Lord have mercy on their soul if they were ever to even contemplate that. I think you see these Antifa people rising up in these cities, right? You'd never see a conservative rising. You never see a group of conservatives rioting and setting businesses on fire and looting. Can you imagine the news media? Seriously, imagine the news media. You'd never see that. But it's okay for them. So who's financing them? Well, this afternoon, and I'm still doing some research, so this is only alleged, and I'm saying alleged, I'm just reporting what I've read. There are some reports out there that George Soros is behind it. They're saying that the people who are being bussed in as the real rioters, not people protesting, but the real rioters, are funded by George Soros. There was a truck that was apparently dropping off pallets of bricks. I think it was in Atlanta last night, so they could throw bricks at the cops and throw bricks in through the windows. Who paid for the bricks? Signs are the same, shirts are the same. Who's paying for all of that? So again, I ask you the question. See, at the same token, you don't see conservatives out rioting and burning down their cities, right? Have you noticed that all these riots are taking place in Democrat-controlled cities, where they've treated the black people like garbage, And then they turn around and they blame it on whitey nationally. You see how this crap works? They're the true racists. Those who don't claim bigotry and racism but project it on others. Look at Joe Biden. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. I mean, what did Obama do for the black community? 8 years. Nothing. Nothing. Except stoke the fires of racism and hatred and try to divide the country. Black or white, we're all Americans. Black or white, we look at what happened with this police officer and we detest what happened. It was wrong. Black or white, we can't be divided if we're Americans. These Antifa protesters and rioters, they can try, but thank God Trump made an executive order today that Antifa is now a terror organization. Thank God. And they're going to round up their leaders too. And there's a lot in Hollywood who apparently, allegedly, still looking for more sources. I've read 5, but I'm still looking for more because I want to make sure. People in Hollywood have been paying for the bail money for the people from Antifa to get out of jail. Yeah. But, no, Hollywood and the media, they're not involved. They have no say. They have a lot of say. So to sum up, this is what I like to say about the Democrat Party. And then I'm going to tell you to go and read everything that I posted and do the research yourself. But know this, the Democrat Party will never take us down a good road, folks. Never. So this is the Democrat Party. So, if the Democrat Party was a termite, the problem with termites is that they attack a structure from within, hollowing it out until it fails by collapsing under its own weight. The left is basically doing the same thing to Western civilization. They're hollowing us out from the inside until we collapse. On every metric, they are trying to do this. They've almost collapsed our healthcare, our current healthcare system during this lockdown for the pandemic. I'll post some links to that as well. I mean, it's what they've done is so sadistic at the expense of the American worker, the American business owner, the American health officials, not the officials, but health workers, doctors, nurses. It's a crime. It's an absolute crime. They've now proven that they will do anything. They will sink to no depths. You thought there was a basement to this? Well, they broke through the basement. They're in hell, and this is what they're projecting. I swear to God, they have the devil incarnate himself working for the Democrat Party writing their story, because the narrative is not the actual story. The narrative is the story that they want to give you on mainstream media. You're not seeing the truth on mainstream media. Everything is orange man bad, conservatives bad, conservatism bad, capitalism bad, America bad, Americans bad. These people hate us. They hate conservatives. They hate centerline thinkers. If you don't think as they do, man, can you imagine if they had power and control and they had their Antifa jackboot, brown shirt wearing rioters rioting your city every friggin' night, beating people up, basically saying if you don't conform into what we want, we're going to beat the crap out of you? It's a good thing we're not giving up our guns, right? So, in November, I think everybody knows what to do. There's only one thing to do. You have to vote red up and down. And here's the reason why. There may be some in the Republican Party that may not be good folk, but they're far and few between. So with that being said, I can tell you that the Liberal Party is definitely not your friend. They'll do nothing to help you out. They'll promise you a lot of things. It's all fluff. they'll do more harm to you than good.